Okay. I want to give it right into the hour just so that I don't want anybody hopping in, not knowing what's happening as we log in. Hopefully you're all in the right place as you're logging in. You should be seeing Patrick's screen. We are here to talk about economic perspectives and real estate. Where will the market go? Where do we go from here? I can read today, I promise. All right, we're right at 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today. We're joined by Patrick Stone. Patrick has enjoyed a lengthy career in real estate and real estate related services. He is currently the chairman and CEO of Williston Financial Group, and you serve on the board for quite a few other groups as well, and we're named one of the top 100 top most influential people in real estate, and one of the 101 real estate industry doers. So we're so excited to have you here. Today, again, I'm going to hand it over to Patrick in just a moment to get started on his presentation, but I wanted just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We'll be getting to all questions at the end, just because there's a lot of information that'll come in, and so Patrick will move through it, and then when we're done, we'll go through all those questions for any that haven't gotten answered. When you logged into Zoom, please make sure that you entered your NERDS ID and your first and last name accurately in order to receive CE. If you did not do those steps, or you put in a fake number, we will not be able to process your CE, so please feel free to drop a chat to Oregon Realtors Education and we'll get you sorted on that if you're not sure if you logged in under your correct name. Please remain for at least 50 minutes of the hour in order to receive your CE, and we'll be sending out the PowerPoint after the class, and we'll be sending CE certificates within 2 weeks. Okay, I think that's my list of things. With that, I'll hand it over to Patrick.
Thank you, Erica. And how do I get the slides up? Oh, here we go. So wait a minute.
They're on your right screen.
Are they up?
Yep, they're up on
All
the
right.
right screen. And you'll just
Hi, everybody. I'm going to go through a slideshow, but before I start, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the level of uncertainty we have right now in the economy and the persistence of high rates, despite the fact that it looks like inflation is trending down and that we can go forward from here. So just kind of real quickly going over some of the things that are creating a problem, if you will. Obviously, inflation and seeing inflation come down will make a big difference. But the debt ceiling, I think, is the one thing that is probably caused the most angst in terms of uncertainty. It also caused a credit rating downgrade by Fitch. It went from AAA to the U.S. government debt, took it from AAA to AA plus. They're now right where S&P went back in 2011. So a credit downgrading like that, and one of the comments they made in their credit downgrading was that the political uncertainty or political dysfunction. There've been a lot of comment about whether or not this is a good move on their part or the timing or anything, but really, I'm going to be honest with you. I am a little bit concerned over the debt ceiling issue and the constant or the lack of understanding by our politicians, maybe about what kind of impact that has on the economy. I will tell you candidly, it cost us about 0.5 point of mortgage rate, because of leading up to it. The uncertainty around it, the prospect of it happening again at the end of 2025. And then, the fact that the Fed, the government didn't spend any money in the last couple of months running up to the debt ceiling resolution. And consequently, they're going to issue about $1 trillion worth of T-bills in Q3 and maybe another 180 or 852 billion in Q4. So we're going to see a real surge in T-bills coming onto the market over the next 5 or 6 months, about $1.8 trillion worth of T-bills. And that's going to cause some upward pressure also. Now, I don't think the 10-year is going to go much higher than it is right now, but it's going to stay up there even though inflation's abating because of the debt ceiling issue. The banking crisis, if you will, also caused a lot of anxiety. We have about 48 800 banks in this country. And, credit tightening has been pretty profound lately, in part because of the meltdown of 3 banks earlier this year, but also because there's a strong movement by the Fed now, or by the Treasury Department, FHFA, whoever, to try to get the large banks with 100 billion in assets to increase their capital reserves by 16%. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's causing a lot of stress in the back rooms of the banking industry. We've seen commercial real estate issues being brought up here recently too. There's a estimate, there's about $1.5 trillion worth of commercial real estate debt comes due by the end of 2025. And given all the conversations we've had lately about commercial real estate, office occupancy, and all this sort of thing, that's causing a lot of anxiety. What are we going to do? I will tell you just real quickly that there's about a billion, or excuse me, $1.5 trillion worth of private equity money sitting on the sidelines, ready to pounce on any assets that the banks have to take back, or have the inefficient. Their borrowers have inefficient capital to support the debt. Geopolitical uncertainty, that's been going on. The Ukraine war exacerbated that problem. I think Russia just recently shutting down the shipment of grain in the Black Sea ports. That's also causing a problem. Credit bubble, I got to tell you, we have more debt now than we've ever had in my lifetime by far. Household debt's about 17 trillion. Global public debt's about $92 trillion. That's up 400% since the year 2000. So it's quadrupled, if you will, in the last 23 years. U.S. government debt is about 118% of GDP right now. Advanced economies overall have about 118% of GDP versus 70% in 2001. Emerging market economies have about 78% debt to gross domestic product compared to about 47% in 2001. I'm going to just take a second and just share with you what the government debt has been in my lifetime, because I think you'll be kind of amazed at how quickly it's gone up. I was born in 1947. Government debt that year was $258 billion. Graduated from high school in 1965. Government debt was $317 billion. I got out of the Army in 1970. Government debt was $371 billion. 1982, it topped $1 trillion. It was $1.142 trillion. 1990, it topped $3 trillion. It was $3.235 trillion. The year 2000, it got up to $5.674 trillion. The year 2010, up to $13.5 trillion. The year 2020, up to $27.7 trillion. And now we're at about $32 trillion. So do we have an issue here? Yeah. There's a couple of solutions to it. It shouldn't just be a political football that causes the parties to be able to point at each other and makes us all pay more money because we can't resolve this. A couple of ways of doing it. The economic growth would shrink the debt to GDP if we just held expenditures where they were. The other thing, and I'm not a Ronald Reagan fan, but he had an idea, and that is we should just have a flat 10% tax rate for everybody. We'd have more than enough funds to fund this, to run this country and also pay down our debt. But I don't know if we'll ever get there. So anyway, Fed borrowing about $1 trillion in Q3 and about $852 billion in Q4. And we'll see where this goes. But those are the main issues I think that have people concerned right now. So let me go through my slideshow fairly quickly. Economic outlook, inflation is coming down fairly significantly in the U.S. And we're seeing a headline consumer price index here, or consumer purchasing index here. You can see that's dropped quite a bit. One of the things that probably is not clearly understood by a lot of people is the impact of real estate and owner's equivalent rent in both the CPI and the PCE numbers. In the CPI number, 40% of the core, which is in the dark blue here, 40% of that core CPI number is based on owner's equivalent rent, rent and owner's equivalent. Owner's equivalent rent is if you have a house and it goes up in value, what would the equivalent rent be? Now, one of the problems here, and I'm going to tell you, this really frustrates me to no end. We've all noticed that rents, they sort of peaked, came down, went back up, but they basically have been somewhat flat for about 6-7 months now. They only check the actual rent number once every 6 months. So it takes a year from the time that something happens with rent and owner's equivalent rent before it actually shows up in the CPI. Core CPI, again, you're looking here at the different components of core CPI, and we're starting to see it come down meaningfully now. But again, it's not the Fed's primary index. The reason for that is this core CPI is really based on a tremendous amount of surveys, opinions, and that sort. They like PCE because of well, before I get that real quickly, U.S. interest rate hikes, and here's what the Fed has done, and compared to the last things over the last 20 years, and you can see it's been an incredibly quick rate hike cycle. Also, goods and services consumption, just by way of showing you real quickly why we had the inflation start and why the Fed called it transitory. The red line is services, the blue line is goods. So the economy is a function of the total of goods and services. You can see that both dropped dramatically with the onset of the pandemic. However, goods came back fairly quickly, and that is because you could buy things online, even if you were sitting in your home and never left your home. My driveway was a FedEx parking lot there for about a year. And you can see that the goods dropped but recovered quickly. Services took a long time to recover because that's in person. So it took about a year and a half before that actually started to come back. It is still impacting wages a little bit because we're finally filling up the lost jobs and services. Goods is evened out. A lot of things, a lot of the conversations around goods inflation was based on supply chain congestion. This is Goldman Sachs supply chain congestion scale. This was at 10 for over a year and a half. And you remember that it was just crazy impact of supply chain. And that's because pandemic, in fact, impacted everybody, and people couldn't get workers to do things, and it was hard to get things shipped. And if you look at this slide, you can see in the third quarter of 2021, it cost anywhere from about $17,000 to $21,000 to ship a container from like Shanghai to Long Beach. Today, it costs $1,000. So it's almost 20 times cheaper right now than it was in the third quarter of 2021 because of the supply chain congestion. So that issue is gone. So PCE, I mentioned the Fed doesn't like CPI. They like the personal consumption expenditures because it's based mostly on business statistics. And you can see that this is a Goldman Sachs chart here, and they expect it to start dropping. And it is dropping, not as fast CPI, but it is dropping. Market rent growth leads rent inflation in the CPI by 1 year. I'd already mentioned this. They measure it twice a year, so they don't pick up the change for 6 months. And it takes a year before it actually comes all the way through. So by late this fall, we'll start to see the impact of rent and owner's equivalent rent being virtually nothing on the inflation scale. That'll really bring down the inflation numbers for CPI. The impact of commodity prices on year-over-year personal consumption expenditures. You can see that, again, Goldman Sachs thought this was going to come down fairly dramatically. I'm a little bit worried right now, some of the agricultural things because of the Ukraine war, but I think we've pretty well compensated for that. And the rest of the world has picked up both oil and commodity supplies, shipping, and economic exchange, if you will. So I think that's helped dramatically. Wage growth, it is still fairly strong. It is coming down. It still has a ways to go. But it's one of the reasons that it's taken so long to kind of work its way through is because, again, we had goods come back fairly quickly, but services took a lot longer to get back on track. And we've started to fill up on that. Wages and salaries for civilian workers, you can see in Q2 that it was down from high fives down to about 4.6%. Producer price index, this is an indication of what's happening in the future. And the producer price index is coming down dramatically. So we're looking pretty good in terms of getting rid of inflation. Personal consumption expenditures from a year earlier overall dropped fairly dramatically. Core is coming down a little bit slower, but I do expect this to get down to about 3.5 by the end of the year. We'll see. Civilian unemployment rate, actually 3.5% right now. And, we really have a situation in this country where we talk about, and I'll show you a slide in a second, where we talk about unemployment versus job openings. I'll try to give you a little color on that, but non-farm payrolls, June about 209. July came in at 185,000. So the hiring is slowing down. Manufacturing has slowed down. Hiring is slowing down. Are we going to have a recession? I don't think so, but I do think we're going to come to what they've been optimistically calling a soft landing. And I do think things will slow down and inflation will die with it. I got a kick out of this and had to share it with you. Job satisfaction hit a 36-year high in 2022, according to Conference Board survey. 62.3% of the people are satisfied with their job. And this is a 36-year high, which I think was sort of surprising. Getting back to what I said earlier about job openings and unemployment, and there's been a lot of political discourse around this, and I think it's sort of unfortunate because a lot of it's misinformed. The job openings started being higher than unemployment in 2016. And it has been, other than the short-term impact of the pandemic, which you see on the left side here, job openings have been more than unemployment since 2016. A lot of that has been because of what we've done with immigration, and a lot of the lower paying job in this country, a lot of labor, a lot of construction work, a lot of agricultural employment has been dependent on immigration. And we need to get our immigration system fixed. And I don't want to get political about what exactly we should do, but we need to deal with it. We need to figure out how to make it fair, equitable, and sustainable, and also in a manner that we can all agree to work. So we'll see how that goes, but we do need to do something here. And pardon me, I hit it back the other way. So why are people so focused on an inflation, or excuse me, on a recession? You've heard this over and over again. We're going to have a recession. We're going to have a recession. A lot of that is because of what they call yield curve inversion. When the 2-year T-bill becomes higher than the 10-year T-bill, historically, there's been a recession shortly thereafter. And you can see on this chart, the gray area, vertical gray area is a recession. The blue line shows the difference between the 10-year and the 2-year Treasury. When it goes below the black line, that means that the 2-year Treasury is paying more than the 10-year Treasury. And that is a yield inversion. And again, historically, it's predicated, or it's been a preliminary indication of an oncoming recession. And I think that's really a lot of the reason we've heard a lot about recessions. Again, are we going to have one here? We don't know, but I think it'll come to close to a stop, if not a recession. I thought this slide was interesting because one of the things that is not well published by the press in our country, or well understood by most of our population, is what a dominant role we have in global economy. This particular slide here shows you how large company CEOs, mid-sized company CEOs, and investors felt at the beginning of the year about how they felt with regard to the global economy, the domestic economy, access to capital, industry conditions, customer demand to improve or worsen over the first 6 months. In other words, are you optimistic or pessimistic about your business or where you're going? If you look on the left side, large company CEOs were 100% negative. Mid-company CEOs and investors were 100% positive. How could that be? Well, it's very simple. U.S. corporations manufacture about 40% of everything manufactured in the world. They manufacture about 40% of that 40% overseas. So we don't see the economic impact of it. It's not counted in our GDP because it's manufactured and sold overseas, but it does show up in our pocketbook because it does create a lot of capital in this country. But large company CEOs are all involved in corporations that do business overseas, and they were very concerned about the global economy. A little bit less so now, but still have some angst about it. Mid-sized company CEOs and investors are focused totally on the U.S. and much more optimistic. Heard a lot about household excess savings. We were actually down about $5 trillion in U.S. households since 2019 to where we are today. And it's really, it's really been kind of an interesting ride. We had a tremendous increase in excess savings up to $2.1 trillion in mid-21. And that was mostly because of stimulus programs around the pandemic. Excess savings remaining was down to about 900 billion at the end of 22. It'll be down to about zero by the end of this year because we're still consuming a lot and spending a lot of money. I do think that will change. A share of household debt that adjusts with market interest rates And this is really key because a lot of people go, oh, interest rates have gone up. This is because of the U.S. household debt. This is going to have a tremendous impact. Only 11% of our household debt is tied to market interest rates. The rest of it's fixed debt. Required household debt service payments as a percentage of disposable income, about 9.6%. So the American consumers are pretty good shape. Housing starts. Okay, this is hitting a little closer to home for all of us. And housing starts dropped like a rock in early 22. And it's really understandable. I have a couple of good friends that run fairly large home building companies, and they were pretty blunt about it. And they were pretty honest about it. They said, hey, look, how can we go out and build spec homes? We don't know how much it's going to cost to build the home. We don't know where we're going to get the labor to build the home. And we don't know when we're going to be able to sell it. So are we dumb or what? Are we going to go out there and just throw homes up and hope we can build them within 6 or 9 months, within maybe 20 or 30% of what we thought it would cost to build them, and then somebody will buy them? So they shut down really. And you can see here where in 2022, housing starts just dropped off dramatically. They are starting to come back. I will tell you, there's a tremendous amount of conversation right now among builders and investors in new construction about where we're going to go in the next couple of years. And a lot of the big builders are gearing up dramatically. They feel much more comfortable now about the cost of materials. They still have some issues with labor costs, but they're feeling a lot better about where we're going. And I do think you're going to see the inventory grow dramatically over the next couple of years in a very, very positive manner. Sales price of existing family homes, you can see here, sales price January 23 down, back up. One of the things to note here, and a lot of times this is not probably articulated very well by the Case-Shiller Index or news media that tracks home prices. Home prices, I like to follow median price on existing home sales, but I also would like to point out that it goes up in the spring, comes down the rest of the year. So you have a very cyclical nature to home prices. I think you all know that. You live it and work it. But for somehow the media can't quite figure that one out. The 20 city index decelerates at a faster pace as affordability shrinks. This was in May, and then that came back. And, you know, I'm not overly worried about home prices. You may see a slight decline in some areas. Overall, I think you'll see home prices generally trend up. The 11 of 20 metros recorded annual price reacceleration. This just shows a big city. Portland's on here. We were down a little bit more in April of 23, in May of 23. We started improving a little bit. We'll see where that goes. Again, I'm not too worried about that. And historical median home sale prices. We've got the U.S. single family and condo median sales price in the blue graph, and the green line is the annual home price appreciation. And again, you see a lot of seasonality, ups and downs in it. Existing home sales by region. Okay, June on an annualized basis, about 4.1 million. That's pretty low, and it's pretty scary. You can see that overall, most regions had some impact, some a little bit more than others, but basically no one region really took it on the nose, if you will. Median price of existing home sales, again, same sort of seasonality shows up in here. And then the one thing I like to show people talking about median sales price of existing homes, instead of following the Case-Shiller Index, I like median sales price. And then I like to also break it down by region because it varies dramatically, as you can see in this slide. People talk a lot about, well, why are people leaving the West? Is it political? Is it this or that? Well, the largest reason in most cases is you can't afford to buy a home in the West if you're a young person. So you move somewhere where you can afford to buy a home. House prices in the West are very high. They're double what they are in the Midwest, the median existing single family home. The South had the fastest growth over the last 3 years, down slightly here looking at June of 22 to June of 23. But the South for about a year and a half there was up over 20% each quarter. And then you can see that in this particular chart here, the Northeast and the Midwest were both up June of 22 to June of 23. And every other region was down. But overall, the differential is about the same between the regions. They do not move all at the same time or same pace, and we're nowhere near the same level in terms of median existing single-family home price. Home ownership by region is also somewhat varied. And if you look at this, the Midwest, about 70%, you get out to the West, about 60%. Now, home ownership is really, that is the person living in a household actually owns it, whether it's a single family or a rental. And obviously, in most places, people don't own rentals. So the home ownership rate is, historically it's running mid 60s. It'll probably continue to do so. Because Zillow's single family home value index year over year change, you can see lowest area is the West, and that's because we have the highest average price by far. We've also had a fairly strong movement into the Southeast and the southern part of the Midwest, mostly Texas and Arizona. And it has been varied quite dramatically around the country, but the West, again, because we've had such high home prices, year over year change has been much less there. A lot of talk about people not moving because of mortgage rates and because it's so high a percentage of people now have mortgage rates under 4%. And there's some validity to that. That does create a certain amount of stickiness. But I would also point out that there's a cultural thing that's been occurring over the last 40 years. And you look at this chart here going back to 1985 and then 1990, the share of U.S. population that moved in the previous year hit about 20% for all moves and about 13 and a little over 13% for moves within the same county. Then it trended down from late 1980s all the way through the start of the pandemic. It went from a little over 18% down to about 8%. Culturally, we had a fairly significant change in the amount of moves. Now, some of that, honestly, is due to the fact that we've had a significant lack of new construction for the last 12, 15 years, actually about 15 years now. And consequently, we've had a shortage of homes, but we've also had an underlying cultural change in how mobile we are and where we live. Average 30-year fixed rate, 6.9. I apologize. The slide was made a few days ago. This morning was about 7.3%. I did want to share with you, if I can find it real quickly here, mortgage rates. All right, so today we hit a high of about 7.38%. I don't think they're going to go up over much from here. I suspect that they'll start trending down, although not real fast for the next couple of months. But I wanted to share with you mortgage rates. And I've just, again, this is maybe a little bit of perspective, whether it's valuable or not, I don't know, but it's interesting. So I started in this industry in 1975. Mortgage rates were a little over 8% the day I started. They finally broke 7.5% in 1993. So from 1975 to 1993, they were above 7.5% for, that's 18 years. They broke 7% in October of 98. They broke 6% in January of 2003. So I started in 1975. The first time I saw mortgage rates under 6% was January of 2003. Now, I'm not real good with math, but that's 28 years before they finally got under 6%. They broke 5% in March of 2009. Now, we had a real extraordinary event, and people need to understand this. The quantitative easing effort by the Fed was dramatic. They spent a lot of money trying to stimulate the economy after the Great Recession. What they did is they spent $120 billion a month buying T-bills and mortgage-backed securities, and they drove the interest rates down, down, down until actually they got under 3%. I don't think, I'm going to just say this straight up. I do not think we're going to see mortgage rates under 4% again in my lifetime. I would be real happy with anything from 4.5% to 5.5%, but you're not going to see mortgage rates under 4% again. So housing payment, how's this impacted housing payments? You can see this, Redfin does a good job of showing housing payment percentage year over year. This year up about 6.71% over last year at this time. Home purchasing power 2018 to 2023. You can see we're down even below where we were in 2018, which was pretty low. It got a lot more interesting there for a couple of years with the low rates, but we're back down. So purchasing power is back where it was. The GSEs did raise on the last year. They raised their purchase price overall to about 700,000. I think 13 markets they'll buy loans up to and over $1 million. And then people ask me a lot if I'm worried about any sort of price decrease. I am not. Maybe you'll see small decreases in some markets. Overall, I don't think you're going to see any meaningful price decrease. You're certainly not going to see any sort of wave of foreclosures. You can see here on this mortgage originations by credit score. For the last 3 years, I think 2/3 of all mortgages had a credit score over 760. We just don't have the junk we had prior to the Great Recession. You can see here the product risk, that the blue section on here up to the Great Recession. Product risk is subprime loans, stated income loans. You could walk in and say you made $500,000 a year and you got a loan, whether you had a job or not. And then you can see borrower risk was credit scores, and both of those are just well under control. We do not have a problem there. Homeowners equity now is really a substantial part of the overall value of a home. And look back to where we were prior to the Great Recession, where we are now. American consumer about 55% equity in U.S. homes. Multifamily housing units delivered, obviously with some of the concerns over availability of homes and everything else, and people needing homes because we've had a large population growth in the head of household age. We had a lot of building of commercial real estate, multifamily. And I said earlier that there's about $1.5 trillion worth of loans coming due. Some are in the multifamily and the apartment area. A lot of them are in retail and office, and we'll see where that goes. I do think we've probably topped out in multifamily housing units. I think we'll start seeing more single family built. Rents were shy of the record high in June. You can see they peaked in late 22, dropped a little bit, came back up, but I don't think they're going to go anywhere from here. It should stay pretty much right in this area. And office occupancy, I just threw this in because we're getting a lot of conversation about what's going to happen to offices, people coming back to work. Vacancy rate now is 14 to 16%. Occupancy rates down in like 48%. So we got an issue here, and it's going to be interesting how we resolve this. A lot of talk about conversions into residential. That doesn't make sense for 90% of the offices. So we'll see what happens. Share of small business owners reducing cost. I'm showing you this slide because I don't think the media probably gives enough credit to the American business management. Small business owners have done a good job of trying to reduce costs and trying to be really cognizant of the fact that they need to lower their expenses in this uncertain market, and they are doing so. A business investment, this is corporate capital spending plans. They're down right now, and this also reflects the fact that the economy is slowing down and going to slow down more. Do I think there'll be a recession? I think the odds are 50-50, but if it's a recession, it's going to be a recession in name only. It's not going to impact us very much at all. I don't think, even if it is a recession, it'll have a nominal impact. I wanted to show you this slide because talking earlier about the government debt and all the machinations and the accusations and political discord around it. This is a Congressional Budget Office projections of U.S. debt as a share of the gross domestic product. You can see back in 2007 when this was done, they were pretty confident debt was going to come down. In 2011, they were kind of neutral, and now they're pretty negative about where we're going on the debt. Wanted to show you this slide because, again, our media does a very poor job of helping people understand that globalization already happened. It's done, it's over, it's finished, and it's having a profound positive impact on the world. And looking at this was done in 2018, but you can see global GDP. It actually, in 1950, it was what, about 8 trillion? This is through 2018. Right now, it's a little over 120 trillion. It has doubled since the year 2000. Global economy has doubled since the year 2000. And there's a book called Factfulness. If you're interested in things, you don't watch TV and get bored like I do. Book called Factfulness kind of details the impact of this globalization on everything to do with world health, literacy, and everything else. And it's been fairly profound and very positive. So let's talk about Oregon, pandemic recovery. It's kind of interesting to compare Oregon with the US. You can see that our employment hasn't increased the level of the US, but real personal income is up much stronger than the US as a whole. And our economic growth has been higher than the US as a whole, percentage wise. Population growth, and this is Oregon Office of Economic Analysis. And they don't, what this slide tells me is they don't have any idea. They're worried, they're concerned. They just don't know if we're going to have net immigration anymore. I will tell you this, we have a couple of issues. Cost of a home like in Portland is unnecessarily high because of taxes. We have a few issues. However, we have water, and water is going to be a very popular commodity, given what's going on in the Southwest and just the climate change issues. I think we're going to be a very popular place for people to move to. Okay, this shows a baseline forecast for Oregon residents all ages, but then it shows zero migration. What happens if we don't have any migration? So basically, we continue to grow in terms of population if people continue to come here, and I think they will. The population changed since 2000, and you can see that the growth areas are Crook and Deschutes County, and I think that's Grant County. They've all had a 1.7 to 2.5% population increase. A couple of places like Multnomah County and Hood River, they've dropped, or they've been very small or even negative. Population by age, and this is hey, for our business, this is a good thing. Millennials is the second biggest population bubble after boomers. And we have a tremendous amount of young people that are looking for a home now. You see how the home ownership rate goes up with age. This is for the Oregon population. And this was done in 2022, but I think it's still very pertinent. And that is that if you look at this and you say, okay, the millennials, in 10 years, millennials home ownership will probably go up, 15%. So 15-20%. So we're going to see a fairly strong amount of buyers out there wanting to own a home. Demand changed the number of households, 22 to 2032, 10 years. Baseline forecast 190,000. No immigration, goes down to 145,000. Stronger household formation, headship rate in Portland MSA, sort of the same thing as the millennials get a little bit older, more and more head of household, more home ownership. Oregon mortgages by interest rate. This tracks pretty close with the national numbers, a little bit different, but pretty close. And you see under 6, about 5 to 6, 7%, 4 to 5%, 19, 3 to 4%, 43%, and under 3, about 25%. I mean, so this is actually pretty means we've got a lot of people with good mortgages. Record home equity in Oregon, same thing. You can see it going up here. And, home equity is about 160% in Oregon. That's pretty fantastic. Rebounding headship rate, we got more 25 and 30-year-olds are now moving up into head of household. Urban counties, rural counties, old guys like me, we tend to move to urban. We tend to get lost in the process, I guess. Get into rural counties as we get older, want to get away from everything. Household income higher than the nation's. Look at this, the household income, what's happened in Oregon since about right after the Great Recession started going up. And it is significantly higher than the United States average, about $11,000 or about $10,200 higher than the national average. I can't tell you specifically why, but it's really, really good to see. Priced out of Oregon households, this is sort of the negative side of that. Share of households who can't afford medium homes sold with 5% down payment. That's dropped dramatically, as you can imagine. Oregon housing demand in June 2023, there were only 32.4% of the homes that had price drops, down from 35% of the homes in June of last year. Oh, a little bit of seasonality in that too. I don't think you get that message in the media, but a lot of seasonality impacts house prices if things don't sell. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think drives the housing market in a minute, and we'll get back to that a little. Construction outlook, employment is really, really good in Oregon. Over the year, employment changed by region, June of 22 to June of 23, Willamette Valley has gone up dramatically. Then the coast and central areas, okay. Eastern, not so much. Portland, not so much. Seasonally adjusted unemployment rate, the bad parts here, obviously, Klamath County, Crook County, and I forget what county that is next to it, but it's fairly, very low population. Oregon employment change since peak. Leisure and hospitality still hasn't come back. Manufactured hasn't come back all the way at wholesale trade, at retail. Things still have a little ways to go. Government, transportation, construction, professional and business services have improved fairly significantly. Oregon employment change in Oregon metro area. Corvallis has just gone through the roof there, and then Salem, Portland. So Willamette Valley's done very well. Percent change since the peak. Leisure and hospitality still hasn't recovered. Manufacturing still hasn't recovered completely. Unemployed persons, Oregon statewide, we're back down where we were prior to the pandemic. And then the single price versus employment. And I think you see here that, we've had a price increase, but employment gain of virtually the same level. So I think that's pretty good indication. New listings in Portland, you can see that how they're down this year. That's kind of scary. Dropped quite a bit from 2021. Pending sales are down also, although not that far down from 2022. That drop off started in May of 2022. And then permits for construction. We've built up a lot of multifamilies since the end of the Great Recession. Single family has been fairly stuck for about 8 years. That needs to pick up. Multifamily is probably overbuilt a little bit. Affordability index. This is fairly negative, to be honest with you. And I did a little digging into this. I think Oregon is at 19.6% of, takes about 19.6% of income to own a, I'm sorry. Oh, good. I went the wrong way here. Takes about 19.6%. I can't get this back. All right. Anyway, 19.6% of income to afford a home in Portland. And that's about the 6th worst in the country. We're behind California. And I think Portland's cost of home ownership really reflects maybe the excess taxes we have now on property ownership here. But it is kind of bad. So before I take questions, I just want to make a couple comments on home ownership. I do think we've seen a profound change in home ownership in the U.S. In my opinion, the desirability of home ownership declined fairly steady over a period of about 40 years. When I was young, buying a home was the first thing you did as soon as you could afford to do it, because it was a guaranteed way to wealth and social stability, if you will. I think that desire of home ownership dropped off dramatically over the last 40 years. Well, it's recovered now. So when I look at home ownership as a function of demand versus supply, demand is desire and affordability. Desire is very high. 75% of millennials interviewed said home ownership is a functional part of the American dream, and 65% thought it built intergenerational wealth. So desirability of home ownership is back up to a high level among the people now looking to buy homes. Affordability, that's the issue. That's the issue we're having to deal with right now. I do think that mortgage rates are going to come down, but I do think it's going to take a little bit because of all the issues I detailed earlier. You'll see mortgage rates start to drop in the fourth quarter, but I think we'll get under 6% maybe by spring of next year, and maybe down to 5% by spring of 2025. And if that's the case, 2025 will be a very, very, very good year. Supply is going to increase because builders are ramping up, and they are getting fairly aggressive about it right now. So I do think you'll see some improvement in that area also. So Uncle Pat, my projections, I think we're going to end this year about 4.6 to 4.8 million on annualized basis of sales, existing homes. 2024, maybe 5.5. And then 2025, I think will be well over 6 million. So with that, Erica, I'll take questions.
All right, so far we only have one question. If anybody else has additional questions, please post them in the chat or in the Q&A. apologize. One question that we have is, will you speak to the Fed's balance sheet, specifically the MBS portion?
Well, that's just want to speak to it. It's huge. Uh, it's very, very, very huge. I'm not worried about them doing anything precipitous or irrational about it. So I don't think it presents any sort of problem to us, but they're going to let it run off as the debt expires, if you will, right? So in other words, they're not going to go out and sell it or dump it, but they're going to let it run down. They're not buying anymore, and they're going to let their balance sheet run down as time takes care of the obligations.
Great, thank you. All right, we have 6 more minutes until we hit the 50-minute mark and can grant CE. So I do hope that we have some more questions from folks. So please pop your questions into the chat for us. I'll just, out of all of the information that you shared today, Pat, what was for you, was there anything that was really surprising that you weren't expecting to see when you were putting together this presentation?
You know, and one comment I would make is that I think because of the level of anxiety and uncertainty, we are taking a little longer to have economic corrections, if you will. By that, I mean, looking at what's happening with inflation, you would, in normal times, or what we used to call normal times, you would expect rates to come down much faster than they are. But we've got an interesting environment right now in this country. And I worry a little bit candidly with some of the political discourse being irrational and confrontational as opposed to in the best interest of the American citizen. I'm talking both sides, okay? I'm not making a political statement in front of in favor of anybody. I'm just saying that our political system is not functioning well right now, and it's costing us money. It's costing us money because rates are staying a little higher than they should.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a few questions from attendees. One asks, with mandated homelessness and affordability bills passing, how do you think these issues will affect our market? If that's something you want to speak to. And another one that we've got is, what do you think the most important messaging we as realtors can be putting out into the world right now?
The most important message, home ownership works no matter what the mortgage rate is. And I say that one of the reasons I kind of detailed for everybody what mortgage rates were for a long time is to show you that people bought homes and they did pretty well, because when you buy a home, the money that you were spent on rent, you're no longer spending on rent. It's basically an investment you're making that appreciates in value. So I think buying a home makes sense no matter what the mortgage rates are. Obviously, that higher the mortgage rates, it creates problems with obtaining a loan. But I do think that buying a home is a good idea. I do think rates will come down so that you can refinance. It'll probably take a year from now before rates are down 1%, but let's or not quite a year, maybe 9 months, and then I think you'll get to the point where you can refinance again.
Great, thank you. Somebody's asking, in view of the low mortgage rates, how long will it take to run out of the balance sheet?
I don't think I understand the question.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure either. In view of the low mortgage rates, don't you think the real estate industry is carrying undue burden in the economy? Is the follow-up to that question.
You mean that the real estate industry is being punished because rates were so low? I'm not quite sure. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm obtuse.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure either. In view of the what they've typed is, in view of the low mortgage rates, how long will it take to run out the balance sheet? Don't you think the real estate industry is carrying an undue burden in the economy?
Well, mortgage rates, let me back up. Rates are hard for everybody right now compared to where they were. And I mentioned the commercial real estate market and a lot of loans out there to people that own small commercial real estate are going to have a problem because they can't renew the rates at what they were, or they don't qualify, or they can't make the payments or whatever. I think interest rates hurts everybody, probably as in terms of active economic activity. Residential real estate right now is probably the most dramatically impacted. I mean, we are down, what, 45% roughly? I mean, depends on where you are in the country, but at least 45% in terms of activity level, maybe more. So I think it has hurt us. It's hurt lenders. You see a lot of correction among mortgage lenders. A lot of some lenders have gone out of business. Other people are selling. All lenders have had dramatic reductions in staffing, as have we in the title insurance industry, and as have realtors. I mean, there was a lot of realtors doing very well. It's a lot harder right now. So it's had a pretty big impact on it's had a big impact on our industry. It's had a big impact on the economy overall, but we're one of the industries where it really gets clobbered, if you will, by higher mortgage rates.
Thank you. One person asks, the amount of multifamily being built in the pipeline, how overbuilt are we, and what do you think will happen there? Just a bit higher vacancy than before, therefore lower rents?
I think because the new home construction has been how do I want to say this? We haven't built enough new homes now for 15 years. So apartments have picked up a lot of that. I think the impact on apartments, the fact that there's so much construction of apartments, that impact will start being felt once rates come back down. So probably in the next year and a half to 3 or 4 years, you're going to see vacancy rates go up in apartments. I don't think they'll go up horribly high. I don't think they'll be I don't think it'll be traumatic, but I think we've seen the boom in multifamily. I think the boom in multifamily is over.
Okay. What do you see happening in the future with respect to current commercial space vacancy and their future absorption?
Well, this is going to be really interesting as this $1.5 trillion in debt comes due over the next year and a half. I'll just be straight up with you. So I'm involved in a couple of private equity enterprises, and one of them, we've set aside quite a bit of money and have good relationships with a bunch of banks that have made commercial loans, and they will be talking to us, and they know we're interested. We'll be interested in coming in and buying assets. And obviously we'll be able to buy assets at significant discounts if the owners are in problems. I think this is going to be a bit of a change. I do think you'll see private equity get into commercial real estate at a much higher level than they have been in the past because of the upcoming trauma, if you will, with commercial loans coming due. I do think this will work out. I'm going to tell you straight up, I love having the flexibility of working from home, but most jobs in our country, you go to college, you get a degree in something, but most jobs are really dependent on the job training, OJT. If you don't have people interacting with each other, you lose that. So you don't have the same level of skill in the workforce or interactivity. And then Harvard has done multiple studies over the last 85 years on happiness. And they have found that one of the biggest problems retirees have is they lose the social interaction of having been at work. Well, if we take that away, that will cause a problem, because we do need that social interaction. And I think a lot of new thoughts, ideas, and innovation come from social interaction. That won't happen if we're working from home. So I do suspect, and I could be wrong, but I do suspect that we'll see a return to the office, maybe not on a mandatory 5 days a week, 40 hours a week basis, but we'll see a significant return to the office over the next 3 years.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Okay. With that, I'm going to thank everyone so much for your questions. And Patrick, thank you so much for your time. As always, it's so great to have you here. You always bring such a fantastic insight to what's happening in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We will email out these slides here shortly. As a reminder, you need to be logged in with your NERDS ID in order to receive CE. If you do not see your CE certificate within 2 weeks, please shoot us an email, education@oregonrealtors.org. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their Monday. Thank you so much, Pat.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye.